What is up? I'm Annabelle Hasselbeck here with Kasey Hudson today, and this is Respect Her Game. We have a very packed hoops conversation for you all today. New news in the WNBA. We'll go through the latest AP college basketball poll. We'll react and preview some big games, and of course, we will give our girls on fire. But Kasey, how was your weekend?
Oh my gosh, my weekend was so fun. I had some of my best friends come up from Tampa to welcome them to the cold Boston, some of the coldest weather. And we did a lot of hockey stuff. We went to BC versus UMass on Friday. Sorry, BC fans. And then we ended up going to Four Nations USA versus Sweden on Monday. My days of the week are crazy. I kept thinking that was like on a Tuesday. But it was great to catch up with my friends. It's the longest I haven't seen my closest friends, my best friends in like 7 months because I've been from New Jersey to Boston. So I loved it. But you were running around with your friends too. Were you skiing or snowboarding?
Yes, I was skiing. You know what? I always think that I should be a snowboarder because I grew up wakeboarding, but skiing is what I did, and it was great. I got to redeem myself. I had a terrible first experience skiing probably 8 years ago. So this was a great redeem myself, actually learn how to ski. But it was an awesome trip. Got to see, kind of like you, reconnect with a bunch of my friends. It was in Vermont. And the best part and the funniest part of the trip wasn't even the skiing. One of my friend's cars could not get back up the driveway when she was trying to leave. So we had like 5 of the guys push this car up the driveway, up the ice. I mean, it took an hour and a half. Finally, someone came up with the idea to, hey, let's get a piece of plywood down, put like wood on the icy driveway, and they got the car up. Yes, under the tire. It was pretty wild. I mean, we got a running start, the whole thing, but I don't know if you've ever been in that situation, but we were like, we got to get this girl home. It was, yeah, so here is the video clip. The wind is coming. I mean, it was like straight out of a movie, but I feel like these are the moments, and thankfully, like, we got up the hill, it was no problem, but these are the moments that you look back and you're like, man, I'm going to tell my kids about that moment someday, but definitely a bonding experience for this group.
Oh my gosh, a learning experience. I would be so stuck in this situation. Of course, the snow and everything's new to me, but the wood is brilliant. Absolutely. I mean, I think the closest I've experienced to that was like parking over ice that I had to do this weekend because it ended up being like a random snowstorm just about on Saturday night. So after that, we were trying to figure out how to like clear the tires and stuff and make sure that we can drive around properly. But that is exciting. It does make the best memories. Anytime snowboarding or skiing makes great memories. My friends gave me a hard launch into snowboarding. I rolled down half the mountain before I figured it out, but look, I can snowboard. So we'll save that footage for another time.
Would you say that you like consider yourself a snowboard skier? Because I am like not in the slightest.
No, I haven't even tried skiing yet. It was the crash course to snowboarding, then figured it out, and now I've just like stuck to snowboarding entirely because I kind of have some PTSD on like rolling down a hill or mountain again, and I don't want to go there, but everyone's like skiing's a bit easier, so I have to see who I trust in that instance. Yes. That's for sure.
That's so true. You need people who are going to go slow with you, stick with you. That's why I was very thankful for my friends in this process when I really had to learn. There were a big group of people who were helping me out, telling me, you're going to be good. You're not going to die. It's going to be okay. So that is very important. Yes, that is very important.
Yeah, that just eliminates the trust issues with my friends.
It does. That's where you should take your real friends and see how they react of that. I love it. Well, Kasey, we had some big news in the WNBA this week. Cleveland is expected to be the WNBA's 16th expansion team. They should return in 2028 if this happens. The bid was approximately $250 million, according to Sports Business Journal, which is absolutely wild when you think about the other bids for the other past, 13th, 14th expansion teams. And Cleveland does have a 90% chance of sealing the deal for this team. It's not determined yet if the Cleveland will use their former name, the Rockers, which they were a team back in 98 to 2003 before the team crumbled. But we'll see where it goes. What are your initial thoughts on Cleveland getting a WNBA team?
I think it's necessary. I think this is a move that they need to make sure they can execute on and get the deal done. Obviously, timeline will be a different conversation, but I think it's important because a number of reasons. Now that the WNBA is gaining the traction, the attention that it has deserved all this time, some of the big conversations that were coming up over the last year, Annabelle, was the fact that there's not enough teams when it comes to that playoff like tension and compete. They wanted to get other teams involved so that that bracket can look different, so the playoff pressure would look different, and we can start to look at the emphasis of the real skill set of these players when they make it into playoffs. The cutoff, the margin for it, with there being a certain amount of teams in the WNBA, it just kind of like packs everybody having an opportunity to get in there. And I know that WNBA wants a little bit more compete in this. So I think it would be huge adding another team. It'll change the scope of the schedule a little bit. It'll change the cadence of the schedule a little bit. And maybe it'll also encourage another team getting in the mix so that the WNBA can get the proper amount of expansion and play time and that added emphasis to what these women are doing.
Definitely. I love that you brought up playtime, because even when you think about just sheer numbers, right? Like adding another team, adding more roster spots, that's going to give so much more opportunity to some women's college basketball players to someday be pro, right? Like there aren't ample amount of professional women's opportunities like there are for the men. And so this is really cool and exciting that not only is it, one team, but it could potentially be more teams down the line. And just for these college basketball players, now there is that same heightened, okay, maybe it could be me. Maybe I could get that one spot.
Yeah, and that's such a great point too, because I don't think anyone takes into consideration when you're looking at a league and how many teams it has, 32 teams, however many teams, that's more opportunity and that's a larger scope to recruit players, to draft players, to bring people in. And then, of course, the money concept of it, it's going to help put money back into the WNBA as a whole. So the amount of teams is important. The amount of ability to fill roster spots is going to be more beneficial and just add so much more gumption to any college player. I mean, I don't want to take it back to like my experience, but I know that I was so passionate about soccer. I loved playing, but I know that at one point my parents are like, okay, academia versus like pretending that, you can go pro one day. And it was so limited because there was only a certain number of professional teams. That whole process just felt very limiting. So it's tough. Adding teams to the WNBA is going to open that up for collegiate players. So that's such a brilliant point on that. And then it's just going to help add more money to the sport. And I think this is such a good time too, Annabelle, because considering everything that paved the way through Caitlin Clark's entry into the WNBA and some of these other top players, Angel Reese, that people are so excited about. When you have this much hype around something, that's the time to show people that like we can add to it and get more fans involved. And Cleveland's a good starting point too, because I mean, how much are people talking about Cleveland basketball outside of the era of LeBron James? I mean, I know they're a top East team right now, but still, I think it'll just add to everything in a good way.
Definitely. And Cleveland even saw with the 2024 NCAA Final Four when they hosted it, how well it did. And the crowds that came out, they sold out. There were like 37,000 people there. I think there were more viewers than even the men's title game. So I think for Cleveland, even though the deal isn't sealed, it's not done, they don't know for sure, there hasn't been like a definite statement that they will have this WNBA team. It looks like it. There is that hype, and they did see, okay, this is a city and an area and a fan base that is really excited to potentially have this team. And I know there were a lot of local college basketball teams and head coaches from those schools that were, talking to the local news stations about this news, and they were just saying how excited they were to have potentially a WNBA team in the same area that they have their college team, and what that would mean for maybe the WNBA team to come play in their own arena, in their own gym, but then also the opportunity that it would give to their own college basketball players, not only just to watch and learn from a W team near your area, go to games, but the excitement that it brings their program. And sometimes when you're just around elite players, you don't even have to be on the same court as them. Just watching them in person really elevates your game as an athlete. And so it's cool to see the excitement from these college basketball teams. I know some of the coaches are saying, I'm going to buy my season tickets right away. They're so excited. And some of these coaches have been around for a long time. So they were, in this area when the Rockers were still playing. And so for them to potentially have that team come back, it's really exciting for the area of Cleveland.
Yeah, I feel like we're getting a lot of that theme right now, like having a chance to play back in your hometown or where you went to college, because you're building your brand there, especially in college. And then it just becomes this new community that you're a part of and that you're invested in. And then you have to go away to play on the professional level. So I know a lot of athletes that are just kind of like, nothing beats that playing where you went to college or playing where you grew up, that hometown feeling. I mean, we see it a lot here in Massachusetts. Any game that we're covering, any team or anyone that we're talking about, as soon as that Massachusetts kid returns, it's just a whole different level of conversation. So that's the other great part about expansion possibility, is like giving players that opportunity. And as you said, like where they went to college or where they played once upon a time or where they're from, they're going to have that chance to kind of be on a whole different platform that you don't really get to do. And I think so many players want that nowadays. We might be able to get it here in Boston. Have you heard some of the whispers going on?
I have, and that wasn't this city that I really thought was on the list. I know there was Philadelphia and Nashville and a ton of other cities, but then Boston came in the picture. It's like, let's go. And I think what's so exciting about Boston is that we have the Celtics, right? And so I think when you can match a W team with an NBA team, it just really elevates the opportunity that you're going to have already with that basketball fan base, but then also the resources that come with it. And yeah, this was the announcement. An ownership group led by Donnie Wahlberg and a former NBA Rookie of the Year, Michael Carter Williams, is planning to bring the bid to have an WNBA team in Boston. This is according to the Boston Globe. And I know Mayor Wu and also the governor said, there's a huge market for basketball and WNBA here. So they're working to pursue this opportunity. But I really think it's incredible, not because selfishly we're in Boston, so I think that'd be so fun. But when you do have the NBA team and that infrastructure, there's a lot of opportunity that you can kind of just hit the ground running with these WNBA teams.
Yeah, and I mean, what better than a Wahlberg to get into the mix, honestly? I mean, between the Celtics, who, again, champions last year, they're looking at another run this year, and then you've got a Wahlberg into the mix. I feel like there's going to be so much fun branding opportunities and things that they can pull into this to just add the emphasis to bring fans into the arenas. I know the larger conversation is where to play consistently, because TD Garden, you've already got Bruins and Celtics, and it's hard to get another team in the mix. We got the Boston Fleet here, but I feel like fans will hop on real fast to there being a WNBA team in the mix and then pulling some good talent over here. Isn't it Boston a city of champions? I'm still learning.
It is. Yeah, that's the word. Well, Kasey, just one final question for you on this WNBA news with Cleveland. Do you think that they should keep the original name, the Rockers, or do you think they should change it and make it something totally new?
Ooh, I say revamp it. Keep the name, bring it back, and just show how much the game has grown. When you see those names come back then, you'll see how the PR, the publicity, the branding, the drafting, the roster, how all of that was formulated. And I think everyone will really, truly appreciate how much the WNBA has grown when you revamp the name, bring it back, and show how you can take all of that and magnify it, because the game has grown a lot. And why not? We love vintage, we love throwback, and what better way to throw things back than to show that you can come in and compete right away.
I was going to say the vintage. I think people are going to absolutely have a field day with their, OG Rockers gear on. They'll be like, okay, I was a real fan back in the day. So I love that. But whether or not they take the same name or they change it up, it's very exciting news for all of basketball, really, especially the fans in Cleveland. And if you're enjoying the show, you can catch new episodes of Respect Her Game every Thursday. You can watch on YouTube, Twitch, and listen on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and wherever else you listen to your podcasts. All right, well, every week leading up to March Madness, Kasey and I are going to be going through the AP Top 25 rankings, just especially because of how much this has gotten shaken up, okay? Like, this is not what we thought it would look like at this point in the season, but it's still super exciting and almost better than I probably could have imagined with the competitiveness of this tournament. But starting off with the new queen of the court, number 1, Notre Dame. They're 22-2. They just knocked off UCLA from the top of this bracket and ranking, really. They beat number 11 Duke 64-49 in a big ACC rivalry. Huge win and accomplishment for the Irish. And then at number 2, we have Texas. They're 26-2. The Texas Longhorns took down LSU 65-58, moving them up 1 seed, and the Longhorns could really potentially win out the SEC regular season, but we'll talk about that in a little later. And then at number 3, we have UCLA, the former people at the top, former Bruins at the top. 24-1 is their record, and here we're saying, oh yeah, UCLA, they fell from number 1 to 3. They've only lost 1 game, okay? So we don't need to freak out, but it is pretty wild. They lost to their LA rival USC. And then at number 4, USC, 23-2, even though they did They did beat UCLA. They are still below them. They did move up 2 spots. Number 5, UConn Huskies making it to the top 5. This is something that was definitely foreseen at 24-3. They moved up 2 spots, and they did this by really having this huge win against South Carolina, 87-58. They snapped South Carolina's 71 home game winning streak for the first time, first top 5 win that they've had this season, which is absolutely insane just to think about a team having a 71 home game win streak. Like, that is incredible.
It's wild. You wonder what's going on that court, like what vintage magic has been touched there in order to get that kind of streak going. You really never hear of it, but it's funny because I just want to double check. Last week on Respect Your Game, did you say that Texas was a team to look out for? Because I swear that you were mentioning that they were in the hunt.
Maybe I did. Texas or Tennessee, one of the T's.
No, you mentioned Tennessee, like solidified Tennessee, but then you were kind of, I swear you were like, also keep a quick eye out when it comes to Texas. But yeah, a lot of movement. That's why these brackets and these AP polls are so much fun week in and week out. And like you're getting to the point of the season where everything counts and you don't know who's going to come out on top. That's why March Madness is called March Madness, because it's these teams that are sitting on the cusp of that number 7, number 8, right off the cliff of like that ranking at 10 spot that can just sneak into the mix and take everything. We also talked about teams that kind of get moved around a little bit once we get these new AP polls going. So Mississippi State taking a dive. They jumped down a little bit. Most teams are staying put where they're at. Maryland jumping up to number 5 seed spot. You got Kansas State, who has now been bumped down. Vanderbilt, who's now been bumped down to a 7 seed as well. As you just mentioned, Annabelle, you got Texas sitting at the top there, and then most other teams when it comes to the Region 2 just kind of hanging out where they have been. A lot of teams kind of got knocked down a peg, though. Oklahoma State, Oregon did, Baylor did, Kentucky got a knock up, and we'll get a chance to talk about that, and then Florida State trying to get into the conversation. So I like the on-the-bubble teams that you can keep an eye out for also. A lot of whispers about Princeton, but these AP polls look really good. I think you're onto something, though, between Tennessee, and I swear you were the one who mentioned Texas.
I hope so. We'll go with that, Kasey. So I appreciate you giving me the shout out. I got so many teams in my head. I hope I hit them up. But it is really crazy, like you said, just how this is all shaken up. And I really do think it stemmed from that UConn win over South Carolina. Even Dawn Staley said herself, she said, there is no silver lining in this. Like, we got beat real bad. And that was the truth. And this was an opportunity for UConn to really make their point. And they needed that. They needed that big win, really. And South Carolina, they were the number 1 coming into the preseason rankings, and now they're at number 6. So it is really wild just to see where this has gone. But let's dive into the new number 1, Notre Dame. This is the first time they reached number 1 since 2019. And here is head coach Ivy after their win against Duke.
This is a big moment for us. God is so good, that's what I'm going to say to start off, because this was a game with a lot of pressure heading into this game. First time in program history. And I thought this team was fantastic. I thought they came out focused. They rose to the challenge. I thought that they played great together. I thought they shared the ball. Duke is a really great defensive team, and we just turned it on in the third quarter with our defensive intensity. It was incredible, something I've never experienced. And I'm so proud of this group of managing and navigating the pressure that we have, and we celebrate it. I celebrate them because they are so special, and they just are playing just great basketball. I love the way that we're sharing the ball. I love the way that we're playing together, and I know we're going to continue growing and getting better. But I'm just super, super grateful for this group and where we are. You gotta kind of embrace where we are. I was really encouraged by the crowd. I always say this, but I'm so grateful for this community, this crowd. They came out. They just the energy that they pour into us. We really, really feed off it. So I'm super grateful for South Bend and the community that comes out to support us. It means so much to us. So I'm so grateful.
I love just the emotion that Coach Ivy showed in that press conference, and just how you could feel really the pressure that this team felt, right? Like, think about the top teams and who they're going up against, and for them to get to play in that environment and have, like she said, that fan base, it's so incredible. But man, like, if I'm anybody, I am buying stake in Notre Dame athletics right now. Like, are you kidding me? Just with their football team, basketball, lacrosse, like, what a fun place to be a part of that environment.
I love that you mentioned the football team because you know me, I'm all about drawing off of something else. I had it for my girl on fire last week, drawing off of her alumni winning. And I think that, Notre Dame, they made a great run football wise. And now she basically just said it. They're having some historic marks in their program at the moment. They're completely supported by the fan base. And she's just really proud of this group. And they are a special group. I mean, if you look on Twitter, a lot of the things that have been tweeted out there throughout some of the games for Notre Dame basketball this season is like, they're really entertaining to watch. They're pretty quick when it comes to transitions on the court, which is going to make it exciting. It's going to keep the pace of the game. And then we've talked about it a number of times, some of those top stacked defensive basketball teams out there, and Notre Dame is one of them. And that's what's helping them sit at the number one spot for the ACC at the moment. So she's getting me amped up to keep an eye on Notre Dame, but I think you hit it on the head. Well, they have a lot to pull off of at the university as a whole at the moment.
Yeah, well, as a BC Eagle, it's hard for me to say, man, I wish I was going to these Notre Dame games, but it is true. It's so cool. And even the football is making an appearance there. Marcus Freeman was there. And just like the excitement that brings your athletic department and program and just student fan base, really. I know for me, when I was at BC and the head football coach would show up to one of our games, like, it was talked about. Like, we might not have, interacted with him during the game. We just saw him there, and it just gave you the sense of, oh man, like, the most powerful person in the athletic department cares about our team and is showing support to our team, because football dominates on college campuses. And when the football coach shows their support to you and to your team, regardless of how good you are, right? Like, Notre Dame women's basketball is number one in the country. Like, obviously they have the support they need, but there's just another level of importance that shows you as a female athlete. It's really awesome.
Yeah, I think it just brings more unity to it. I mean, that's what college is about, right? And then when you start having programs that are supporting other programs, it is a big deal to see the coaches in the stands or to see coaches on the sidelines, just like bringing it all together. And then more importantly, honestly, to be supportive of the women's basketball team. It's easy to be supportive of, the schedule for men's basketball and everything else going on, but to take the time and support that program is tremendous. I think it's going to help.
Definitely. Well, let's talk about the Battle of LA, because this is not what I thought or how the game would go. USC knocked off UCLA in this game 71-60. USC is still ranked number 4, right below UCLA, but USC came out hot, man. They were not going to lose this game. I think they forced UCLA to have 5 turnovers in like the first 10 minutes of the game. And USC, the great thing about what they did is they didn't just get the turnover and then throw it away. They got the turnovers and they converted on points. They were able to score 7 points off of these plays and get that momentum. And Juju Watkins, man, she showed out. She was coming in hot. She was ready to shoot, knocking down her threes. But what did you think of this game?
Oh my gosh. Well, it's one of the things that we talked about. USC had a chance if they brought the defense, and that's exactly what they did. You already touched on it. The turnovers was one key aspect, but their ability to maintain those turnovers and to capitalize on them. It's the game of possession, right? So UCLA barely had a chance to have the ball long enough to make and execute on the plays. They were able to contain their top players and take away those shooting lanes. And then Juju is one of my girls to watch. Not my girl on fire, but one of the girls to watch, because as offensively dominant as she can be, she can jump in on those defensive plays and help. So they actually, it almost sounds like I'm talking hockey again, but they have some women on their roster that are really good at applying the two-way game, getting in on the offensive action, but being so sturdy and stout on the defensive action. But USC came in really strong on the defensive side of things, and I feel like they just kind of owned that game between possession time, turnovers, and picking up those points. What did you make of it?
Yeah, no, they did, especially defensively, like you said. They had a game plan for Lauren Betts, and it was just evident, right? Like, we weren't in their scouting meetings, we weren't in their film, but you could tell that they knew what they were doing. They had a plan of attack, and Coach Gottlieb even talked about it. She said, sometimes we had to take her 1v1, sometimes we were going to double team her, right? And there's strategy that goes into that, and Lauren was able to make plays and throw over the double teams at some point, but they just really weren't able to get through it. And it's really cool for a team to put so much intention and so much thought into a scouting report and a game plan when you're going up against one of the best players in the country. And USC was able to completely just use that to disrupt the UCLA offense.
Yeah, and I've been to UCLA a couple of times, love the campus, but I feel like that home advantage, that rivalry, it always just tilts things in a different form and fashion every way. Like, it can be anybody's game because of the intensity of the rivalry, but that game planning, like you said, I think the biggest thing for them was to minimize any opportunities of having the ball and shooting the ball, and USC came in hot on that one.
Definitely. Well, for the SEC as a whole, they are supreme with 7 ranked teams total in this top group. And let's just see Texas at number 2, South Carolina number 6, and LSU at number 7. And the funny thing about all these teams and the commonality is they're all playing very well at home, almost perfect. Texas is 14-0 at home, South Carolina 12-1 at home, and LSU is 16-0 at home. So very tight. And that just shows you how close this is going to be for what the seeding ends up being heading into March Madness. But what are your expectations for just this high level SEC play this season?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, expectation wise, I think SEC has the reputation for having the close margin for these top teams that are competing against one another. So, I mean, the intensity and like the margin I would expect to continue to be there. But as for who's going to come out on top of that one, I don't know. That's where things just get so saucy because it takes a streak of games for somebody to jump ahead. And now we're in the perfect position of the season where that's going to happen. I mean, heading into March, I'm just going to be looking at those teams in the SEC that are sitting right there at that 4th, 5th, or 6th ranking, because those are the teams that just tend to jump up and surpass. But is there anyone that jumps up at you for SEC? That one's hard for me.
I mean, you told me you shouted me out for Texas earlier, so I guess I got to get on the Texas train full go. But you're right. I think just with the closeness of these games and especially some of the scores, it's going to come down to these last few ranked opponents, these last few ranked games. So we'll see. I'm excited, but man, it's been craziness before even March Madness has started. So I can't even imagine what it's going to look like when we get to the tournament. But if you're enjoying the show, you can catch new episodes of Respect Her Game every Thursday. You can watch on YouTube or Twitch and listen on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Well, I know there's been some movement within the rankings, but that really has determined what games we were going to preview this week. It probably would have looked a little different how we had different number ones. But let's start with the new number one. Number 1, Notre Dame versus the number 13 NC State this Sunday. This is going to be a huge game, not just because it's number 1 Notre Dame, but because College Game Day is coming to the Wolfpack for the first time, and one NC State student will have the opportunity to win $19,000. Kasey, have you ever done a game like that before where you could win thousands of dollars on the line?
I haven't been to one where I can win thousands of dollars, but College Game Day is an experience in itself. My brother and his friends made me get up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. I want to say 4 o'clock in the morning to make sure we were out there on time. I was upset because nobody was explaining anything to me, so I don't know where we were going. But then when you got there, it was seriously one of the best experiences ever. I mean, it's one of the things that made me change my major, that's for sure. So College Game Day, with or without money, is definitely worth the hype.
That is awesome. I have never been or seen, and more so never seen in person. So that is definitely on the bucket list for me. But just imagining how exciting this environment is going to be to have the game day show, and then just having the number 1 ranked opponent on your campus. But I do think for NC State, this isn't as jarring of a game as it's probably being made to feel. It's just another ACC team. They've beaten them 3 times in the last 5 matchups in the past. And really, they're second in the ACC, so this isn't like it's, number 1 versus number 7, right? This is number 1 versus number 2 in the ACC, and just being in the ACC formally, those rivalries are real. You're very familiar with these players. You're very familiar with these teams. You know them very well, so I do think that Notre Dame is going to come out with the win if I had to choose which team would win this game, but I don't think that NC State is going to be as intimidated as the moment might feel.
Yeah, I think NC State's going to have a chip on their shoulder for being discounted a little bit. But you said it. I mean, the ranking difference isn't that steep, for one. For two, I kind of feel like there's a bit of a stink for ACC players who feel like that conference isn't as highly respected as in comparison to an SEC. I mean, I heard that growing up with my brother playing in the ACC. I like this matchup a lot, though. Notre Dame, as you mentioned, they took the top seed for a reason, and some of that goes to the players on their roster. One I'm a big fan of is going to be Olivia Miles. It's because the versatility of her play, but we love an assist queen. That's why Caitlin Clark got so much hype when it came to the WNBA. And what's so spectacular about the assist that she pulls off and the ranking that she has at the top of the ACC for her assist quality is because she can create so much time and space on the court to help set up her teammates for success. So that's going to be the interesting part to see how NC State kind of weathers that storm. Can they move along with those transitions? Can they keep pace with a player like Olivia, who's just going to continue to find and set up those lanes? So in conference is where anything can happen. You mentioned it. They're not far off. But how do you think this one's going to play out between Notre Dame and NC State, aside from Notre Dame winning?
Yeah, no, I love that you brought up Olivia and her assists and what that generates for Notre Dame, because in the same way as assists doing that, it's also really good defensive play, and that's what we saw from Notre Dame's Citron, right? Like, she stepped up the game for them defensively when they came out at halftime after their UNC game. It was tight, and she came out with a quick bucket and then a defensive stop, and that momentum just carries your team through. And what it does is it allows your other top players like Olivia to do what they need to do on the offensive side of the court, because they're not taking all the energy and the pressure that, oh man, I gotta make a defensive stop, or I gotta get a block, or I gotta get a steal, right? They're able to not rest on defense, because you never rest on defense, but it just gives them that ease of, okay, my teammates got my back. I need to pick up the slack on the offensive side because she's doing that for me. So I really think that's why Notre Dame is being so successful, is because, like you said, somebody is taking care of, all right, I'm just going to find the assist so that my girl can sit in the corner and hit the three, right? Or just sit back and position herself the right way, and vice versa with defense, so that my top scorers are able to just focus on that and get their minds right for that moment. So I am really excited to see this matchup. I think there's going to be a lot of energy, but I just think Notre Dame having this calm and cooled collective vibe around them now that they're number one, I think that they're going to take the win.
Yeah, they're so composed. And actually talking about like not resting on their defense, but I think that they thrive off of how their defense is playing. I think that their defense comes up with so many big plays. You mentioned the second half notion of Notre Dame's plays sometimes. So like that kind of stuff is an energizer. It's a momentum swing, and it just kind of brings this energy and adrenaline to the play when your defense does something big, and then it's like, all right, now I got to match that hype. I got to match that pace. So I think that that's something to look forward to for Notre Dame playing.
Definitely. And if you look at NC State's schedule too, like, this is not a walk in the park for them. They have to take on number 20 Georgia Tech on Thursday, okay? So like ranked opponent, might not be number one, but ranked opponent. And it's been a hard week. Their attention is going to be divided until Thursday night. Their game's at 7 p.m. You'll probably get back to your dorm at 11, maybe if you're lucky, if you run out of treatment, right, post game.
Right.
But then from 11 on, then you're now starting your Notre Dame prep. And so I think in that case, that's a really hard week lineup to get ready for the number one opponent, right? Like, you don't have the luxury of just preparing for the number one opponent all week, or even 5 days. You don't have that. So I think this is a team that has been pouring everything out. They've had two really close games leading up to this with that UNC game. And so I think just having those long, hard-fought games where you're not really getting your second line in, you're not really getting any subs in, that's when it's going to be hard, because their attention is all on the game that is in front of them.
Yeah, and they're going to have to be careful with managing any sort of fatigue, or like how players are going to respond and be able to have that high impact on a schedule, because as we've mentioned, we're heading into the most crucial portion of the season of the year, and every game messes with that ranking. So I think you're 100% right on. It's not going to be an easy trek for them, but this is going to be a good turning point to see what they can actually produce.
It will. Well, let's get to number 7, LSU versus number 14, Kentucky. Also on Sunday, LSU is going to go to Kentucky for another big SEC matchup. They're coming off a 58-65 loss to number 3, Texas. And here's what Kim Mulkey said on the strength of this SEC conference and what this really means for the conference as a whole.
Kim, the conference is tough, and these are some rough and tumble games going down the stretch. How does this prepare teams like yours and Texas's for what's coming in March Madness?
Well, I think if you see the SEC, wow, it's just a lot of tough teams, and I would think that we're probably all a little grateful when the SEC season is over, because you may think the NCAA playoffs is you can kind of breathe a little, but it's tough in this league.
She took a hesitation and goes, wow.
Oh,
I thought that was
she
so
had my
funny.
response.
Like, yes.
The same thing earlier when you asked me about the SEC. I'm like, I can't even wrap my brain around it. Honestly, like, it is tough, it's intense, it's wild, and anything can happen. But yeah, I was just laughing at the fact that I was like, she sounded exactly like I did, or maybe I sound like her.
Hey, then that means you're on point. You know exactly what you're supposed to be talking about if you and Kim Mulkey are on the same wavelength. But I love that. But no, it is really true. And that's what we're seeing, especially with all of these SEC teams being so highly ranked. But this is a good Kentucky team. They're 13-1 at home. They beat a number 13 Oklahoma team, right? Like, they have had some high successes and high highs that they can point to in this game, or in their season. But really, like, do you think they can beat this LSU team? Because this LSU team has experience playing these top opponents. And for LSU, right, like, yes, this is a big game, but they're really looking at the next couple games that they have past this.
Yeah, no, I feel like it's going to be interesting again, because we talk about how like the in-conference stuff can really intensify things. And sometimes games and the teams like LSU, they kind of have to have their moment of being challenged. And I feel like Kentucky could be underestimated in terms of what they bring to the table. Tiana Key, you're talking about somebody who's coming in strong in the rebound category, and they can change the style of play for LSU. I think on a different preview we talked about the fact that LSU is going to have to make sure that they're forcing their game on their opponent, that they're sticking to their structure. I think that's going to be Kentucky's game plan going into this. How can we force them out of their structure? How can we force them out of the simple set of their game? And what key players can we use, pun on words, to turn over the ball and to make sure that we're forcing them out of their normal style and structure? Rebounds play in huge with that. We saw it when Angel Reese was playing. So a page out of the book in terms of how Kentucky can maybe approach this. But do you think it could be close because of it, or is LSU just going to continue to put up the stats?
I do think LSU is going to continue to put up the stats because they only have Georgia, who's unranked, at home before this game. So really for them, they can use that Georgia game to prepare for this Kentucky game. This is something that coaches will do if you're not playing a team that you're really worried about too much. You start putting in plays that you know you'll run against your ranked game or your next opponent. You'll start running a certain defense that might not even be needed for that game that you're playing that day, but you know that you're going to want to rep it out more than just practice, and maybe even see how will the refs react to this, right? Like all the things, what girl should be put in which position, which slot. And so I think that's what LSU is going to do with Georgia. I think they'll use that as a practice game for this Kentucky team.
Yeah, it'll help them, that's for sure, because again, it's just kind of making sure that they can manage the game. I mean, also something else where they could pull a page out of the book is kind of like what USC did so well versus UCLA. It's controlling the game early. I feel like LSU would have the ability to intimidate a team like Kentucky if they come out and completely dominate and control that first quarter, because sometimes at this point of the season, having that strong first and fourth is collectively what helps you get out on top if the margin gets that close, if Kentucky can keep it within that window.
That's good. Well, I'm so excited to watch all this women's college basketball. Like I said earlier, we haven't even gotten to March Madness, and it has been madness. So we will see who comes on top of both of these games that we previewed. And if you're enjoying the show, you can catch new episodes of Respect Her Game every Thursday. You can watch on YouTube or Twitch and listen on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. All right, well, it would not be a Respect Your Game show if we didn't do our Girl on Fire. So, Kasey, who is your Girl on Fire this week?
I'm going back to hockey, and I'm going back to the Boston Fleet. It's going to be Hillary Knight for a number of reasons for me. We know that the Fleet have been trying to find their footing to be more consistent when it comes to winning. I gave Mueller a lot of love the other day because her game is now starting to come to par leading up to the break that they have and after coming back from the break. But I think Knight just needs a lot of love because the leadership that she brings to this roster, for one, it's showing tremendously in these tight games. Boston Fleet have had a number of comeback wins that have put them back in games that didn't look like they had any reach of being a victor in, and Hillary Knight's been a leader on that. I actually got a chance to talk to Natalie Nori the other day, and she kind of mentioned Hillary Knight and the love that she needs on her name for how much she's helping this team pull through those tight situations and those tight moments, creating scoring chances when it almost seems impossible. So kind of almost the same method of madness when I picked Mueller last week. I got to go with Hillary Knight this week. She was also a key piece in them finally being able to meet Minnesota. That was a tall fleet for the Boston Fleet.
That's good. I like how you said that, and man, like what an amazing accomplishment too, just to knock off who took you out of that championship game. And so cool. And sometimes you do need those veteran players who have all that experience and really the ability to just calm people down, right? When you play an opponent who has taken something so real away from you, like you can kind of get away from the game plan, really. And so that's why it's so important. I love that you chose her as your girl on fire, and I just love it. Man, you are so wrapped up in hockey. I absolutely love it. I gotta go to you for all my hockey things. You're on it and getting to go to those games. Yes, 'tis the season. No, I absolutely love it. But my girl on fire, I'm gonna stick with women's basketball because we're going there. And Vanderbilt, Michaela Blakes sets the record for the most points by an NCAA Division I freshman. She scored 55 points, okay? I can't even like wrap my head around that. I think some of my high school basketball games, we would only get to 55 points as a team. So like, are you kidding me? That is absolutely insane. But she set this record on Sunday with an overtime win against Auburn. And this isn't just the first time that she's hit around 50 points. She had 50 plus points earlier in the season. So this is her second time doing this. And man, Vandy has some big things coming up, not just with that last accomplishment for Michaela, but they play at Oklahoma and then they have to host South Carolina on Sunday. So she is the girl on fire. I'm just so excited to see how she is able to take this momentum that she has and throw it into these next two big games.
I love that you picked her. I didn't realize that it was another 55-point performance, but you don't hear that. You hardly talk about anybody putting up those points, let alone being able to do it more than once. But I hope it does because, yeah, we've talked about how close the competition is, but earlier here on Respect Your Game, we also mentioned the fact that Vanderbilt took a small dive in the rankings for the March Madness bracket, or in bracketology is what I prefer to say, but they're going to need her if they're going to turn that arrow down into an arrow up so that they can jump back in the rankings and see where they'll stand for March Madness coming in. I mean, every week is just a different story. So she's a great girl on fire. I love that pick.
Definitely. And I was excited about it because we had Candace Story-Lee on this show earlier in the year, just with Vanderbilt Athletics. She's the Vandy AD. So I was excited to get to promote one of her players, and she played basketball at Vanderbilt herself, so I can't imagine what she's feeling and just the emotions that are going on around that campus. But so now we have Notre Dame as a school we got to go hang out at, and now Vanderbilt because of the excitement on campus. But Michaela obviously naturally was interviewed by a lot of networks after this accomplishment, and here is her interview talking about this game with ESPN.
We've talked about the 55 points. You had 53 less than 3 weeks before that. What are the goals? Because I feel like you can do more.
Yeah, definitely. I think not really focus on like the scoring, but like just when I'm needed to do that, I'm able to do that and capable to take good shots and get myself to the free throw line as well. But really just want to win.
What exactly do you focus on when you're in a zone like that? What is the mindset?
Wow. I don't even know if there's a mindset or any thoughts going through my head. It's really just attack and just read the defense and make a smart play and just give my team that energy boost.
It's that flow state. That's what they like to talk about. That just means you're in the zone, as I mentioned earlier. So thinking long-term goals, big goals for the season, what do you have?
Just want to have a deep run in the SEC tournament and the NCAA tournament with this team. I think we're capable of it.
I love that that was her response, because sometimes you see these top players and hitting these accomplishments, individual accomplishments, and they're saying, I just want to, hit more points or whatever it is. But she's like, no, I don't really care. I want to get far in the SEC tournament and the NCAA tournament. And for her to say SEC tournament, right? Like we were saying earlier, it is so competitive, so jam-packed. So I really hope to see Michaela do really well throughout this tournament.
I hope so too. And I mean, even if it's not a 50-plus point performance, I thought it was really interesting how she mentioned kind of like reading the plays and making the right plays. And that's what it comes down to, those big stops or those big moments where you can find an avenue to pick up some points. So it just made me question, in a positive way, obviously, like, where's her basketball IQ? Because for her to even go to that when somebody's trying to praise her for her point production, it's like, no, she's mentally in this, and she's mentally in this for her team, not just for herself, which that little margin can help with the SEC.
Definitely. She is in the zone. And that's what you're seeing with these players. They're playing 2 games a week. A lot are on the road, right? Like, when are you going to school? And so she is in that mindset. I mean, the the hours that these women take for basketball in season, and their season is so long, right? They probably are having captains practices in August, in September, right before their season even started. And so it is just crazy to see the level that they're playing at, the competitive energy that they have, and the focus. Really, like, if I had to pick one thing, just like you said, the attention to detail and the focus that these women have and the level that they are playing at some point, all these girls are incredibly talented, right? So it's like, where are you going to get your edge? What's going to set you over that mark? Because they're playing at such a high level that it's really anyone's game.
Yeah, and then you're putting in overtime work, right? Because off seasons are minimal now that you have to be strategizing ahead of time. But you mentioned the school schedule and everything. Like, if you're going to be a player that's going to come in and have an edge of any sort, it's more than just watching film. It's figuring out those attention to details, those small things to do, which means you're putting more time behind film, you're putting more time behind investigating, and then more time into your game, because you have to be able to rise to the occasion and apply those small details to the game. So that is really interesting to point out, because I think that it's going to just take so much more time, and players aren't getting that much notoriety for it, but it's all applying, especially when the competition is this close.
Definitely. Well, Michaela was my girl on fire, so I'm excited to keep cheering on Vanderbilt basketball. But just out of all these teams, and maybe not for records or who you think is going to go far, is there a team that you just have a special feeling towards, or a women's college basketball team that you're thinking, hey, man, I really want to keep watching them play?
It would be cool to see some more stuff out of South Carolina. You know how we kind of talked earlier about drawing from other programs and stuff? Well, for college football this past season, South Carolina, I couldn't get enough of them. I was rooting for them all the time. They were the underdogs in a number of situations that they were in throughout the entire season. So just kind of like looking at that parallel that we discussed earlier, I'm thinking to myself, if there's something to pull off of, it's the underdog energy, it's the ability to compete, it's having a talented roster. So it's seeing what they'll make of all of that and how far they can go. But yeah, not to go with the top teams. Well, I mean, they are one of the top teams, but not to go with one of the teams that are most talked about. I think South Carolina would be an interesting one to keep tabs on. Do you have one?
I think, and I would say the same thing. Like, I'm going to go with UCLA, and I know they are also one of the top teams, but like South Carolina, they've taken that dip, right? And so I'm really interested to see, can UCLA kind of overcome that, like that pride shock a little bit, right? When you're number one for so long, it hurts when you get bumped down. So I'm super interested to see and excited to see how they can rise to the occasion, how they can get themselves back up top and potentially make a Final Four run.
Yeah, I mean, I can never root against UCLA, that's for sure. And you have a brother that's going there, right?
I do. He's a freshman on the football team, so maybe I'm picking them because I want him to have a really fun basketball experience on campus. And I know he says how hype those games are and how exciting they are, and just to be there at the school with all that excitement. And I know he's in classes with some of the basketball players. I'm like, dude, we got to help me get one of them on the show. It'd be so cool. So we'll see. Maybe we can get some fun guests for you guys to have when we're doing all this women's basketball conversation. But Kasey, thank you so much for diving into it today. I love hearing your perspective and all the teams to watch and all the things, and of course our hockey talk as well, because you're on it with all of that. But this was another episode of Respect Your Game. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week.